At multicultural fairs growing up in school, non white students and white students with recent immigrant backgrounds would be encouraged to share the cuisines, dances, and songs of their people. As a white American, I was not invited to participate. I didn't have a culture that I represented. I didn't have a people that I belonged to. I could identify with my Norwegian side and pretend that I know traditional Norwegian songs. I don't speak Norwegian. I could pretend to identify with my German side or my English side, but that wouldn't be authentically who I am. I do have a people that I belong to. I've seen pictures of my great grandfather exploring the West as a petroleum geologist looking for oil. He was captured by, or this is a family legend anyway, he was captured by Pancho Villa's men at one point and escaped by getting them drunk. I have ancestors who fought in the Revolutionary War. I have so many generations of my family that is buried in this soil. The American people is the only people I have ever known, and that's the only people I can call my own. And the family that moved here in the 70s from Vietnam or who migrated over the border in the early 2000s from Mexico, they don't belong to that same American identity. They haven't been here for hundreds of years. White Americans do have a culture, and at this point, we are an ethnocultural identity. Black Americans are considered an ethnocultural identity today. There is an authentic Black culture. There is Black cuisine, Black American music, and they would be encouraged to participate in that kind of multicultural fair. White Americans also have our own traditional music. I mean, the Baptist hymnal, there's obviously famous classical composers. There are American genres of music specific to white America, or more or less specific to it: bluegrass, country. And we do have traditional dances, you know, like square dancing. A couple times I've, gone to a barn and engaged in a square dance. And we have our own cuisine. Maybe the hamburger was invented in Germany or something, but we made it our own. We made pizza our own, hot dogs our own, you know, and there are more specific regional dishes that have evolved. But if I tried to represent any of that as my culture, that would be seen as an offense to non white students, because that would be like telling them that you're not the real American. This person is, whose family has lived here from the founding of the country, which actually isn't all that strange. You know, other nations, we still accept that someone who was born as a Korean, grew up in South Korea, knows Korean as a language, they are more Korean than someone who just migrated there, or someone who is not ethnically Korean, who has lived in Korea and still maintains elements of their previous culture. They're Korean in one nominal sense, but obviously there's a difference between someone who has Korean ancestry and who has only ever known the Korean culture and someone who just came over here. I mean, one of the biggest differences is that the Korean people have to defend the existence of their homeland while they're in Korea for that identity to persist. The immigrant family living in Korea, their culture may persist regardless of what happens politically in Korea. And that's the situation with white Americans. We really did build a culture here. We became a people here, even though we have a mixed background. Every ethnicity starts from a mixture of other peoples. The English ethnicity started from Angles, Saxons, Utes, Celts mixing together. Eventually Danes, some Vikings later on. But now we consider the English people an authentic people. And the same thing has happened in America. And one of the tactics that is used when genocide is waged against a people is to delegitimize their identity. Plenty of white Americans stopped identifying with their previous European ethnicities, and on the census, they will simply put American. That's it. We identify as a people. We have our cultural heritage to preserve, and only we can preserve it. No one else, no other group can maintain the existence of our ethnocultural identity. And this is sort of a shame on me that until relatively recently, when I've thought about politics, I've thought about it in pretty abstract terms. I've thought about, what the ideal form of government should look like. But it's really no wonder that I ended up thinking that way, because I was told that I didn't have a people that I belonged to, and the American identity was as a nation of immigrants. So the American was totally generic. There are no racial or inherent cultural characteristics of the American in that kind of, postmodern concept of what it means to be an American. So government then, politics, for me growing up, was simply how to efficiently organize large numbers of people. And so my political opinions would be, well, I favor libertarianism, or, well, maybe some amount of socialism is good, or these sorts of things. And it's totally vacuous because it's not in the service of any particular people. That kind of politics as like systems engineering could be applied if I traveled to some, planet in another solar system with intelligent life and was trying to design their system of government. Like the same principles would be at work. But that's not how that's not how politics should function. Politics should be about your people and the duties that you have to your people. It's not just about organizing people abstractly. You belong to a people. And if you don't engage politically, your people could cease to exist. You are part of the world. Your people is part of the world. God intended your people to exist. God intends all things that are actual. Of course, evil being privatory is included in that. God is not a cause of evil, etc. But it is providentially ordained that the white American ethnicity came to be self-reflectively recognized. And it's not just like Southern culture. It's not just some regional identity. What we've done lately is astonishing. We developed the automobile. We developed electrical infrastructure. We invented the suburb. So many of the ways that we live on a day-to-day basis are rooted in the white American culture of the first half of the 20th century. White American culture produced these things. That is our culture. Other people obviously adopted it. But if everyone all around the world suddenly started eating Vietnamese food on a daily basis, it wouldn't become generically food. It would still be Vietnamese food. It came from the culture of the Vietnamese people. And so our way of life, the suburban American way of life, with block parties and barbecues and 4th of July, that is from us. That is of us. And it doesn't belong inherently to anyone else. Other people can emulate it. Just like I think it is okay for us to emulate the cuisines of other cultures. Like a lot of the time I have breakfast burritos for breakfast. That doesn't mean that the breakfast burrito is a white American food. No, it's still a Mexican food. You know, I acknowledge that, and I don't think most Mexicans would be offended, but credit should be given where it's due. And we've been indoctrinated not to give credit to the white American people for all of the innovations we've come up with. I mean, if you looked back on white American civilization after hundreds of years, it would look like something out of a legend. You know, a lot of people are fascinated by the idea of Atlantis, some advanced civilization in the mid Atlantic thousands of years ago. Our infrastructure, our global reach, our cultural impact is far greater than Atlantis, if it was a real place, ever achieved. Like, we are more epic than many legendary mythic peoples. We've accomplished a hell of a lot. We're the most industrious and innovative population in the history of the world. And that belongs to us. If we don't preserve it, it will be gone. And we will be some kind of legend. And the people who tell our story won't identify with us, won't care about us. They'll lie about us just like we're being lied about now. And unfortunately, our parents' generation didn't recognize the significance of preserving our culture. They decided to take the easy road and accept multiculturalism because for them, as obviously belonging to the superior civilization at the time, the immigrant populations they were admitting and welcoming into their communities were their obvious inferiors. And when you have a bunch of new inferiors coming into your society, to a certain degree, that raises your status, right? You have access to cheaper labor for your business. The boomers did benefit from increased immigration and immigration from non-European countries. So they took the easy road. They didn't look way down the line. What will the consequences be for my children? They allowed people who were not part of that traditional white American culture to dominate our media, to make our films. They didn't fight to keep control of our culture, of our nation. And so we were brainwashed into believing that we aren't an authentic nation. To be American is to have filed the correct paperwork and to have a residence somewhere. All of that, what it means to be historically American, was forgotten and seen as unimportant. And by the time I was a kid, it wasn't even one among the other cultures. Instead, all of the great achievements of white America were made totally universal. That's just human accomplishment. Anyone can be American. You're nothing special. You have no people. These other kids from multiple backgrounds, they have the American people in some abstract sense, and then they have their historical people. And you only have this abstract identity that applies to literally anyone who comes here and signs the right papers. And yet, I am the one with ancestors buried in the ground here. I am the one with ancestors that fought and died for this country. Not that non-whites haven't fought in our military, and obviously Black American culture has an exceptional place. Historically, for the most part, our demographics have been 90% white, 10% Black. Black Americans were not part of the mainstream white society. There were two separate cultures that evolved in tandem, in parallel, and they did cooperate on a number of things. Ragtime and jazz started largely in Black American culture and developed with white American musicians to become what they've now become, with many spin-off genres that have influenced the music that people listen to all around the world. That's a mutual accomplishment of white and Black American cultures, but they are two distinct cultures. Black Americans don't want to give up their ethnocultural identity, but then we supposedly should be denied ours. On what grounds? Exactly. Again, it is a tactic when you're committing genocide to delegitimize the identity of the people that you're trying to erase. There is no such thing as the Armenians. There is no such thing as the Palestinians. Our parents let it all go. And like Gen X, I'm speaking obviously as a millennial. I'm 33. Gen X is too selfishly absorbed in their own pursuit of wealth and status to really be worried about civic affairs. That's how I perceive it. And not all, of course. Zoomers are only about, 50% white? So it's harder for them to fight for their identity. Millennials have come of age. We are the adults in the room, and we're still idealistic enough to believe that we have a duty to preserve justice. Unfortunately, the conception of justice that many people my age have feeds into the erasure of our ethnocultural identity. But enough of us are aware. We're a minority, and it's a smaller minority in Generation Z and Generation Alpha. But if these three generations, the white Americans in those generations, don't decide to take ownership of their own identity and defend it, it will be gone forever. No one else will step in and save the day for you. No political savior is coming. Our political system is controlled by finance. Money controls politics, and identitarian white Americans don't have the money. And even the ones that do, well, it's funny because in one sense we do have the money collectively, but we don't have those billionaires who are willing to put their neck out there and advocate for our interest. Instead, we've allowed white Americans to be legally discriminated against. We've been disadvantaged rather than enjoying the natural advantage that pretty much any native people reserves for themselves. Like if you're living in Japan and you're Japanese, you have a certain privilege for being, of the people that created the nation. Whereas if you're an immigrant from somewhere else, it's understandable that in some sense you're going to be a second-class citizen. You don't just immediately get all the fruits of other people's labor. White Americans built this country. Black Americans helped. This country is of these two cultures specifically. And other cultures have, or other peoples have come in and assisted in various ways, and we're creating new blends. And some of that is all well and good. But we shouldn't believe that just walking over a border and signing some papers means that you've earned your place alongside, as equals, the people who have their ancestors in the soil. That's not true. Those ancestors matter, and you owe it to your ancestors as a young white American, as I assume you are. If you're not that, well, you have other obligations that I wouldn't know as much about, naturally. But if you're a young white American, you have right now an obligation to take steps to preserve your culture. You're not going to be able to take the political system at large. You can advance your position in society and hope that somehow some kind of revolution one day will be possible and you'll be in a good position for it. But that really amounts to saying, go ahead and cooperate with the system as much as possible. That system which is destroying you, yeah, give it your whole life. Dedicate all your time to serving it. Because that's what you do when you're trying to advance in industry, in politics. You're serving that system that is controlled by international finance. You're serving that system which is trying to erase our identity. And maybe you'll be in the right position at the right time, but maybe not. Maybe that time will go by because you've been too worried about advancing your own position. And you as an individual might end up all right, but your identity dies with you. That's very possible. So instead, we individually have to take responsibility. And there are only so many ways that we could possibly go about this. I've advocated creating intentional communities of our people, for our people. And that is a very American thing. Intentional communities were a big part of the founding of this country. I mean, the colonists, of course, came over and founded intentional communities. What else could they be said to have done? They founded intentional communities. And that's been a part of American culture since its inception. We have more freedom in this country still today than basically any other people on earth ever has, despite the areas in which it feels like that freedom is being encroached upon. It would be pathetic if we declined to use that freedom that we have as a privilege, if we declined to use that for our own preservation, if we create our own communities, as I am doing, I and others are working together to do, if we don't do that, how can our people possibly continue? Barring some kind of miraculous revolution. Besides that, there are other tangible benefits to intentional community. Like I said, white Americans actually do control the majority of the wealth in absolute terms. We have the numbers still. If white Americans could be made to cooperate, we could do whatever we wanted to do politically. That's not going to happen, but on a smaller scale, something similar could. With intentional communities designed intelligently, you can reduce the cost of housing dramatically. The way we're doing it in the Ozarks here, and this is a cheap area in terms of land, and there are no zoning restrictions, no building codes, so you can build more cheaply. We're addicted to comfort. A lot of why the boomers let our country go and our people, put our people's existence at risk, is that they wanted to be comfortable. Our houses have gotten bigger. Our vehicles have gotten more expensive, lately, more so. But we expect luxury, and we could sacrifice that. And in exchange, have a huge amount of resources to work with. Immigrant families, when they come here, Mexican families, they often live multiple families in one household, and they save money, even though they have low status jobs, very often, low paying jobs. They start their own businesses, they cut their expenses, they save, and then the next generation has a better opportunity. That next generation often doesn't live up to it and becomes more immoral and feels entitled in many instances. But that's how American immigrant groups have risen up in American society. They haven't expected that kind of, cushy middle class suburban existence where you have all the freedom you want, all the privacy you want. In intentional communities, we don't have to be all up in each other's business, but uh, we obviously can downscale the amount of luxury that we expect for ourselves. We can build smaller houses more cheaply. I mean, with the community that we're starting, that exists already and is growing, you can build your own homestead for less than conceivably $20,000. The average single family residence in this country, I think, is around $350,000. So the average person, the average homeowner, could sell their home, build something here, and have more than 300 grand left over to do what with? If 1,000 people do that, uh, how much capital does that then give a dissident group that wants to achieve something politically, that wants to produce high quality media, to change the culture, to change people's perceptions of these issues, to legitimize again the white American people and its culture? It's a big number, 300,000. What is that? 3 billion? Or 300 million? No, that's 300,000 times 10 is 3 million, times 10, 30 million, times 10, 300 million. Yeah, so $300 million. That's a lot. I hope I'm doing the math right. Anyway, the point is, it's a very large number. That's a lot of wealth. That's 1,000 people. Presumably, that will be less than the number of people who watch this. Like, we're not helpless, guys. We can actually do a hell of a lot, just like our ancestors did. We have the most accomplished ancestors of any people. And we are still young and vibrant as that kind of ethnic identity. We were just born. We still have a lot of gas in the tank as far as spiritually what our people is capable of. And we live in very interesting times where technological changes mean that with a modest amount of startup capital, we can actually work into emerging industries and dominate them, because we do have, on our side even, some of the highest quality human capital out there. The human capital that built the modern world, that's guys like us. And yeah, making that happen falls to literally no one else. By consolidating resources like this, we can have our own property, look into how we're organizing the land by. People will object on the grounds that, oh, it's illegal to have a community like this. No, it's not illegal. You just haven't done your due diligence in the research. There are legal ways of creating communities like this. It is not illegal to identify with your racial group and to have voluntary association with your co-ethnics. That is not illegal. It feels like it sometimes, but it's the letter of the law that matters. And we have to, put our necks out there and push to defend our own identity and maybe be challenged legally if anything's ever going to happen. Being afraid that, oh, someone's going to sue me. Oh, I'm risking something. Like, listen, you are heading towards sure destruction as a people. Sure destruction. That's not a risk. That's a guarantee. Your people is gone. And that includes everything you value. All of your values are within that identity that gave birth to you, that informed your development. It's not just about skin color or something like that. No, like ethnicity and culture is far deeper than that. It made you who you are. It shaped you to be who you are. It gave you the values you have. So if you want to preserve those values, you have to preserve that people that generated those values. So if you don't care about that, you're basically nihilistic. You're saying, oh yeah, anyone can come and replace me with whatever values they hold. That's fine. I don't care about posterity. It's despicable. It's pathetic. And making the excuse that you would have to sacrifice or be uncomfortable and organize or risk, potentially being taken advantage of by a leader who, doesn't have his priorities straight. But I mean, I would rather take a kind of tyrannical, despotic, and manipulative leader if he accomplishes what we need to accomplish over no organization. Like, bad government is better than no government at all when you're at war, when there is conflict, when you have to defend your people. In a certain sense, at a mimetic level, at a demographic level, we're already at war. There are Hispanic guys, black guys out there literally trying to impregnate white women in order to eliminate the white race. That's happening. I mean, that's just a true statement. You could take offense at that, but I've heard guys like that make statements such as those. So there is a kind of warfare going on. I mean, people think that, oh, well, you're not welcoming of these immigrants. You don't care. It's like, many of these people hate us. Many of these people believe that we are historical oppressors. We deserve to be replaced. We deserve to go extinct as a people. And actually, there is no legitimate people that we belong to. It's just nothing. People come here, they don't speak English, they don't value what we value, and yet we're supposed to just welcome them with open arms. That's insane. There should at least be the requirement, if you're going to immigrate here, that you love the American people and acknowledge the sacrifices that the American people over the centuries have made to build this society where once there was effectively wilderness. Native Americans have their role in the founding of this country as well, and did cooperate in building this country. And maybe I was kind of wrong to only say white Americans and black Americans. It's just Native Americans are such a small minority. Doesn't seem fitting. But yeah, they're also a traditional American culture, distinct from those peoples who have come over here in the last few decades. So, yeah, we do have the ability, we have the freedom and the resources to make our own society within the society. That's available right now. There is no reason you can make excuses, but they are excuses, and your ancestors would be ashamed of you because you right now have a much easier time of establishing the continued existence of your ethnic identity despite opposition than your ancestors had originally in founding the country. They had to come out here and cut down massive trees with handsaws and clear the farms by hand. Like, it's what they did to settle this country is like, it's unbelievable. It's inconceivable that these people worked that hard. And we're being asked to do something I'm asking you to do something far easier. If we take seriously this movement back to the land, return to the land as a viable possibility, if we take that seriously, there is no limit to what we can accomplish. We can ultimately take back the entire country because we can make a lifestyle that is cheaper and better organized. We can build better education systems, and we're doing that. We can integrate tech These emerging fields exist. We can integrate the way we're building these new communities with AI in mind. AI is going to change just about everything. Some skeptics are still out there. I was saying this 10 years ago, and I've been vindicated. For a long time, people in these circles just wanted to dismiss the relevance of it. No, technology changes. Like, new technology opens new possibilities. And we, like a lot of the guys who have signed up and bought in, have computer science backgrounds. We have the human capital to take a profitable position in these new emerging industries. We can organize our own communities intelligently in ways that communities haven't been organized before. And we don't have to just commit to one way of doing that. We can share knowledge, share an education system, share basic values, and still allow diversity. And that is the American people. That's what we are. That's what we've been from the start. We aren't defined by our state. The majority of Americans really didn't support the existence of the United States federal government. They supported the existence of their particular people, the Puritans, or the Scots-Irish Presbyterians, or, these more kind of parochial ethnic identities, ethno-religious identities. That's what people cared about. And they wanted that freedom to be who they wanted to be. We have that freedom. And yet there is an overall American identity that has grown, that we share in common. And it's not just blood, it is blood. It is very much blood. There is a core English and Germanic component that is there in the root stock of the heritage American people. And then other European ethnicities were grafted onto it, and yet further ethnicities are part of it to some extent. But there's a kind of scale of like what is more central to the identity and what's more peripheral. And that ethnic racial component is very real and is there. But there's also, in a way, like a more legitimate claim to be our own distinct people, because we all decided to come here. We decided to be Americans. Our ancestors came here to build new societies. We have to continue that tradition. We have to choose to be who we are, to be who we want to be idealistic, like Americans have been from our founding. And it is literally only us, the guys watching this, the people in our circles. It is only us that can make this happen. If you want to make this happen, do not shirk your duty to your people. No one else will defend your people. Only you can. You are the last line of defense. It's just you. Nobody else is out there that's going to do this. It's just you. It comes down to you. If you want to make a difference, you can. We've thought this stuff through. We've come up with solutions where many people came up with excuses. We've come up with solutions. And we have plans. And we're enacting them. So give up the addiction to comfort that is keeping you enslaved to global finance. Give up the kind of fractious instinct that many Germanic peoples have had through history. Unite to some degree, not absolutely. We're not, total communists. It's not a commune that we have. We have individual proprietors involved. But unite to some extent, enough to at least organize, reduce our expenses, build up this reservoir of resources that then we can use collectively to advance our people and our interests. And we don't have to break the law, and we have a morally defensible position. We have the moral high ground. If people want to say we don't exist, we just have to show them our living, breathing communities. And if they say they can't exist, then we can call them out as the genocidal elite that they are, trying to shut us down. So that is what I have to say. If you want to get involved, go to returntotheland.org. Join our private membership association. You'll then be eligible to buy into one of our communities, to save money, live with those who share your values. And you don't have to commit to living in the Ozarks forever. Consolidating for a time in one place, in the cheapest place where you can buy the most land and accommodate the most people with the least restrictions, just makes sense. If we found 5, 10, 20 communities down here, we can build our power, grow our expertise, and then send people out to other parts of the country. You don't have to commit to being here forever. You can move and organize and grow and network and define that new American people that we are building. Continuation of the white American ethnocultural identity, but also in a new way, of course. We are our own development of it. So you can do that. Go to returntotheland.org, join the PMA, and sign up for our event this April. The eclipse on April 8th is coming through our area. We'll have the full totality. Should be pretty cool. I'm excited for it, just for the eclipse. But also the event will be great. There are a lot of people who will be there with, very interesting backgrounds. I've talked to a lot of really conscientious, high status people who have like interesting ideas to share. How this all came together in the first place. Like, we didn't even plan to do this as soon as we did. I had basically given up on the hope that people would agree to do communities like this. I had lowered my expectations, but then people came down to help me out building my school. I'd like to build a Platonic academy, among other things. I do think that would help. Platonism is, in a lot of ways, the foundation of Western civilization, even though most people are totally ignorant of how. But, Platonism has been kind of esoteric, so I guess it's ultimately you can put the blame on Plato if you want. But in any case, they came down, and it was just nice to be around people who share the same ideas, same values, people we can feel at ease with. It's not like coworkers where you have to walk on eggshells and you don't know what is going to get reported to HR. We liked that. We realized real quick, like, okay, we have to just make this happen. And we did. And if you come to that event in April, there's a good chance that the people there will recognize that, yeah, I would much rather be your neighbor. I would much rather work with you and start our own business than work for international finance, work for the system as it exists. And it's available to us. It's not just a small group. A lot of people are involved. And this is the time. We are building this, and you can help, and you should help. And you can come down and see the eclipse, and that'll be kind of cool. So sign up for the event. You have to join the PMA, but that just means a questionnaire and an interview and a $10 application fee, which for whatever reason we have to charge legally. I don't know. Ask Peter about it. Peter Siri. But so that's all it takes. And you can come down here. It's a camp out. The expense will not be great. The travel expense will probably be your biggest. There is a cost for the event, but it's very low. Just to cover the costs of meals, we're providing 2 meals a day. We're organizing, we're doing the work, we're putting it together for your benefit, for our benefit as the American people, the historical heritage American people. We're not going quietly into the night. We are going to build new things that make the achievements of our ancestors look small, because that's what it means to be an American. So come to the event, meet cool people, and live up to your values, please. Thank you for listening.